Welcome back to part 2 of dealing with PolyDart and checking it out. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And, if you're watching this, hopefully you've watched the first video. If you haven't, go and watch the first one because I don't want to make this video longer by re-explaining it. It's a pretty quick one, I think like 20 minutes, so check that out. And if you're watching this, of course, and you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I have lots of cool content here, at least I think it's cool. And, more to come in Flutter and Dart, and also some of my other favorite tools and technology stacks. All right, so I mentioned I was going to do something a little more real world use case kind of thing. The first thing we're going to do is update our API server. So our API, the server itself. So again, this is just the thing that's running, completely separate from our Flutter app. It's just an HTTP server. And all I'm really changing here is I'm adding another endpoint here called users. So we can hit this, and it's going to do the same kind of thing. It's still going to use that is success so that we can get some sort of like mock errors sent back. And what we're going to do is just generate a list of users, just some JSON or having an ID, a name, and an email. It's very basic stuff. Doesn't matter. It's just really so that we can demonstrate this. Now, because I made a change to the server, I do have to remember to restart it. We don't have any like reloading mechanism running on that right now. So I'm rerunning it now, and everything should be good. Okay, so where should we get started? I think let's make our user model. Now, in this video, I'm going to be doing probably a little more copying and pasting than usual because some of this stuff is just boilerplate stuff and isn't necessarily specific to PolyDart. But let's just make a user model, user.dart. And for this, we're not going to use freeze or anything like that. Of course, you could, no problem. We're just basically making a very basic user model that maps to, has an ID, has a name, has an email. It should sound familiar based on what we did. Let's also make a user service. So our user service is what we're going to, let's see. We're going to make a user service. So we have an API service already. Let's make a user service. We could just put this in our API service, but I like to, have this sort of stuff. And this one I will type out so we can explain it. We're going to call it class user service. And it's actually going to extend our API service. Extends API service. And in this, we're just going to essentially have something that's going to return a list of users. We're not going to worry about pagination or anything crazy like that. We're just going to have this, and we'll just call it get users. And async. And all we're going to do here is go data is going to be equal to await get. Now get, is actually our get function of the class we're extending. But instead of just getting on the base URL, in this case, we are going to do it from /users. And then we're just going to make something called users is going to be equal to data users, because if we remember our API service, our API server, I should have called that something different or put it somewhere else. You'll see the data we get back is it's going to be like status OK, and then there's going to be a key called users, which is actually going to have the list within it. And we're going to do as list. And right here, we are going to return users.map. And we're going to take every one of those and basically take our user object model from JSON and pass in that U data there. And at the very end, we will convert it to a list to conform to the list. Okay, cool. So that is all good. We have a user service. Awesome. Let's make our repository now. So we're going to be using Provider for this, as I mentioned earlier in the previous video. You can, of course, use Riverpod. You can use Block. You can use, Signals. You can kind of use whatever you want. But I just think Provider is like a nice, beginner-friendly, even though I tell people not really to use it now. This isn't a tutorial about Provider. This is just using Provider as a basic example. So we need to install that, of course. Flutter pub add Provider. So we'll have that. And then before we forget, we're going to go to our main.dart, because with Provider, we do have to actually wrap this in a, what is it, a chain? I haven't used Provider in a long time. It's like a change notifier provider. Yeah. Change notifier provider. So we'll wrap it in that. It needs a create function. And this is where we're going to ultimately have to point to our user repository, which we're going to make right now. So I'm just putting that there because otherwise I'd probably forget and go in circles. Let's just make a new folder, repositories, user repository dot dart. Okay, our user repository. We'll do a mix of stuff here, but we're going to have a user repository, and it's going to extend our lovely change notifier, which is change notifiers built into Flutter, and provider makes use of that. So let's just have an instance in here of our user service, just in case we want to use it in multiple places. We'll just call it user service equals user service, and we'll just instantiate it there. There's a few other things we're going to want in this, and remember, this is like our, if you're not familiar with provider, this is like kind of like our state model that is going to represent, the state of our, in this case, list of users. So we're going to import user. We're going to have a list of users. We're going to have whether or not we're loading, and we're going to have potentially a string that represents the error. We're going to create some getters for this. So those are like little private variables. This is a nice pattern, and so that we can't access them directly, but we can create getters that basically point to, these three things here that we'll be able to access. And then for loading our user, this is going to be a future. It's going to be void. It's not actually going to return the users. It's just going to update the state of this model. And we can just do load users, async. And anytime we load the users, we're going to say is loading is equal to true. And we're going to say error equals null because we want to clear out in case there's an error previously. And then we want to call this notify listeners. This is just part of basically telling our change notifier, like, hey, like something's changed. Let's make sure we know. It's kind of like the set state of the UI side of things. And inside here, we're going to have a lovely try exception sort of thing. And we're going to use our, we're going to create something called, or we're going to say users are equal to, so reference to this is equal to await. And we're going to do our user service underscore user service dot get users. And we want to make sure when there is an API exception, as we've seen before, we want to catch that error. And we're going to set our error equal to the error dot message. We know this is an API exception, and error, of course, if we remember this, has a message, which is the string that this is expecting. And then finally is just a nice thing to do a try catch that allows us to, whether it succeeded or whether it failed, at the very end of all that, we want to make sure is loading is set to false. Otherwise, we're going to have like a loading spinner. And then we're going to have our notify listeners. Okay, there we have it. So let's go back here now and finish this up. So this we actually need to, when we create, we want to pass in our user repository dot load users, I believe, except this should be a double dot. We want to chain it like that. So that means whenever this is first read or listened to inside our UI, inside our provider's UI, it'll actually call this function for us. Okay, so now we have our load users. So let's make a new screen. Let's call it like user screen. And our user, let's see, what do we want to do here? So what's cool now is we don't have to use a stateful widget anymore. We can use stateless because provider is going to actually be managing our state and not the widget ourselves, which is, a pro thing to do. All right, so we're going to make a stateless widget, and we'll call this users screen. All right, so for our user screen, there's a few things I'm going to copy and paste in that are really boring, and I don't want to type them out again. I already did that. So let's pull them in, and I'll walk you through them. These are just going to be some widgets. They, of course, could be in separate files, but we're not going to worry about that. They're only going to be used here. So we have our user tile, which just represents one single user that you pass in. It's just a list tile with, the name and whatever kind of stuff. I guess there's not going to be a null option there. We have an empty state, so this is when nothing is loaded yet, and we have an error state. So the error state is fine, just shows an icon and has a retry button, which will do something. And we actually have an onPressed. We're going to pass in a void callback here to basically run our retry so that we can keep that logic in the parent widget. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to throw those in because we're going to be making use of those. So in our user screen, instead of returning a placeholder, let's return a scaffold. And before we forget, because it'll be annoying if we write all this code and then we're like, we reload and it doesn't work, let's go to our main.dart and let's change this to, I'm just going to keep this one here, but we're going to have our user screen. And let's just make sure that stuff is working. We need to, of course, save this file too. And yeah, it looks like we have a blank slate to work with here. So yeah, let's have an app bar. App bar. It's just going to be, a list of, it's going to be users. Cool. For our body, what we're going to do is we're going to use a consumer here. And this is just part of, yeah, okay, there we go. Consumer, we installed provider. And our consumer is basically like a builder that has access to our provider's state at any given time. So we want to pass in our builder, and this takes context, it takes the repository itself, and a child, I think is the last one, but we're not going to make use of that. And we need to make sure we're telling our consumer what type of, using a generic, what type of repository we're talking about here so it can figure it out. And there we have it. So here, let's just make sure that stuff kind of works. Test. And I'm missing one other thing. What are we missing here? Well, let's just see what the error is saying. Oh, what? Okay, 2 main positional arguments. Did I get the right consumer? This is from provider. This looks right. And of course, I just forgot to put the word body here. We're saying this is the app bar and this is the body. So let's just make sure this is working. Now we do have to do a green hour reload because I believe we added this change right here since only doing hot reloads. So there we have tests coming back. That's pretty cool. Okay, so there's some things we can do now. So we can go and we can say, if repo.isLoading, which remember, if we look at that, that's just an option of our property, a getter really, of this property that we're modifying and notifying. So if repo is loading, we're just going to return a center with a child of circular progress indicator. Pretty basic. If it's not loading and we have an error, so we'll say if repo.error does not equal null. So if there's an error and also our users are empty, because we might as well, like, rather than showing an error, if we had data from before, we might as well just keep that data. So we can say repo.users.isEmpty. I don't know what I just said there. And here, this is where we're going to use our error state widget, which just lets us pass in a message, and we can use the repo.error. And the on retry, we're going to pass in a function. So let's actually make that function here. I think this will be a future void. We'll call it like handle retry or something. Async. We won't do it yet, but we'll have it there. And we'll just pass in handle retry, just a reference to it. Okay, so that handles our error state. And then in the case that none of these are true, meaning so this is basically meaning, if it's loading, we're gonna go here. If there's an error and it's empty, we're gonna return, this sort of generic thing. But what I want to do, I still want to show an error in case someone refreshes and we still have the data. I still want to essentially be able to show that there. So what we're going to do is have a column, and in its children, we're going to just have a check here. So if there could still be an error in the case that it is not empty, and if this does not equal null, what we're going to use is this cool widget that I haven't used too many times, but it's called material banner, and it's just like a nice way to have this like good looking, kind of like error message or any kind of like notification message. And it takes content, which is a widget, and we're going to pass in the repo.error in this case, and we know it's not null. And for actions, we can actually pass in a list of actions. So we'll have a text button. And this on pressed, we're going to do the handle retry again. And for child, we'll just have a const of text that says retry. Okay. And there shouldn't be a semicolon there because we're just doing that. So we have this in our column. The next thing in our column is this is a list. This is a column, so we're going to have an expanded to take up as much room as possible after the, after that widget. And its child is going to be a list view dot builder, so we can loop through and get those things. But I'm going to wrap the list view dot builder in a refresh indicator. And again, this is why we made this a function, on refresh, handle retry. We should probably rename this. Let's just call it handle refresh. And I can just simply do that by right-clicking on this and calling it handle retry. Or sorry, so we had handle reload. Reload, refresh. I like reload. There we go. And it refactored this for us. Okay, our item builder. It first has a context and then it has an index, right? We always need to make sure, because this will eventually create an error, we need to make sure we have an item count. And our item count is going to be repo.users.length. And our item builder, this is where we're going to use that lovely list tile we made. I think it was called user tile. And we're just going to pass in the user. And we just get that by taking our repo.users at that particular index. A couple of things I want to do with the list builder. We can actually do list builder.separated, and this will allow us to have a separator builder, so we can kind of put dividers between these things. There's two parameters here. I think it's context, and let's see what these are. We need to actually have this. What are these again? Yeah, context and int. I guess that's the index that we're on. We don't really care about that. We're just going to return a divider. And we're going to give it a height of 0. So it's really just like a nice little thin spacer sort of thing. Okay, now some other things is we have a list view. What else do we want to do here? We have the no, I think that's pretty good. Let's see. I probably missed something, but no, it looks like we're good. We have our lovely list of users coming in with that nice little divider. Let's just rebuild. So if we go in our debug console, we saw it attempted 2 times, but then we got the data, which is cool. And I should be able to pull down on this and actually do a refresh. Let's see. Looks like it worked on the first try there. Oh, we didn't actually hook this up. We should probably, hook this up to do something. I realize we actually, because of the way provider works, we need access to the build context here. So I'm just going to, have that pass in. And we'll have to make some updates later. But basically in here, we're going to await context.read. And what we want to be reading is our user repository. And we want to just call the load users again. So now we actually we can't pass the reference anymore. We actually have to pass and execute the function because we need to pass in the context. So I'm just going to kind of take that and do the same thing with those. And everything else should be fine. Okay, so let's just see if that actually works. If I go like this, you actually see we get the attempt 1, attempt 2. It goes into the loading state. That time it worked on the first try, it looks like. There we go, 1, 2. Yeah, all right, we're looking pretty good here. Cool, some little bit of quality of life. Let's add a floating action button. I'm going to do it, usually I do it after the body, but today we're going to change it up. Floating action button, we're going to return a floating action button. And let's actually use the extended builder, constructor, or factory, or whatever the heck you want to call that thing. And it needs an onPressed event, and we all know what this will be. Refresh, handle. We don't know. I don't know what it is. What the heck is this thing called? Oh, it has an underscore. That's why. Pass in our context. So that's what we want to do with this, and it needs a label. So we'll just have a text of like reload. And last but not least, let's give it an icon just to make it look really pretty. Icons.refresh. Okay, so let's see if that guy goes in there. There we have this lovely reload. So clicking this should do the same thing as pulling down. And this is a nice thing to have, especially the pull down thing is great. Some people don't know how to do it. Also, pull down doesn't work on web. Maybe it works on mobile web, but doesn't work on like, a desktop thing. So I always want to make sure there's another way for people to do it. So there we have it. We have our user one here. Now let's screw with this a little bit, and let's go to our user service, and let's change this to go to like /users1, and I'll just do a full rebuild just for sanity's sake. And what we should end up having after this, if I didn't mess up, we should actually see a nice pretty error. There we go. So we have this not found. So that's because users one doesn't exist. Now, similarly, like we saw in the last video, if I go back to here and let's like turn off my my server, so we'll kind of emulate like some kind of the server being off or any kind of like, hey, I can't reach this thing. And we should see after those few attempts that we get a nice pretty message. And what's cool is we have this like retry button in here, which is just using that same function that that we're using everywhere else. So it's pretty nice. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this package. I know it's like early in its release cycle, and it probably hasn't like had any chance to stand the test of time, and I haven't used it on any production project. This is the closest it's come for me, but I think it's a cool thing. And let me know in the comments if there's other packages that do this kind of stuff. I've not really done this in Dart in terms of in terms of sort of having these like pipelines and whatnot. Of course, I use, if you're familiar with my content, I do use a lot of good ways to handle errors and stuff with using like FP Dart with returning different types of left and a right if it's an error or success. I think I have a good feel for that, but this is something I might, if it seems to work, I might throw it into my my normal production work. It'd be pretty easy to do, and you get that sort of resilience. Now, there's a lot more to this package. I could probably go on for a lot more, but I'll leave that to you. Links are in the description for the GitHub and the package and the docs, especially, which are, I think put together really well. So yeah, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else you want to cover, or again, yeah, if there's any other packages that do something similar. I'm here all day, and please like and subscribe. It really helps me a lot. Thanks for watching, and see you again.